77% of you are unsubscribed. Please hit the subscribe link below. So a lot of people have trouble memorizing Bible verses, and they're like, oh, it's so hard. Some of these verses are so long. Well, there's some verses in the Bible that are easier to memorize. And so I'm going to go over today some of those verses, especially if you have NIV. If you have NIV, then there are verses like Matthew 25:47. And that verse is... And then you have Mark 7:16, and that verse is... And then you have Acts 15:34, and that verse is... I think you see the trend here. There's a lot of verses in the NIV ended up in Alcatraz. They exist in the King James, but for some reason, because some of the places that they arrive in the scrolls and stuff like that, because they're not in enough scrolls, and because there's inconsistency or something, then they get removed from the NIV, and that's when you're going to get the people going, that's why we use King James, because King James is the one that's like, it has everything. It doesn't have these blanks. It's the full Bible. It's the full thing that it's the perfection one. Okay, so let's take a look at King James. Okay, let's for the King Jamers. Okay, if you want to learn some verses very easily and very memorize those. Okay, let's start off with the Old Testament. Okay, so we got some Old Testament verses. You've got Exodus 22:9. And then you have Leviticus 6:3. And then you have, the next verse after, and Leviticus 6:4. Then, of course, there's in Numbers 6:12, Deuteronomy 22:3. And then you're like, that's the Old Testament. Those scrolls were around for a long time. There's some things that are probably, funky with them or whatever. Okay, so now let's do a couple of them from the New Testament just to, Okay. Matthew 5:13. Matthew 10:6. And Matthew 15:6. They're all in Alcatraz. So, sometimes what happens in the Bible is you end up with ones that are, in some scrolls but not others, or they're omitted when they're copied, because back in the day they were copied one to the other. So if it copied from one, copied to the other, they lost their spot, they missed the verse, it didn't get copied over. If it wasn't in enough of the spots, that could be the problem. The other thing that happens too is sometimes someone's copying over one section and they're copying over another section. Like someone's working on Mark and someone's working on Matthew, and they take one of the verses from Mark and they bring it over and they copy it over, and then of course then it's like, oh, well, that doesn't actually fit there. I don't know where that came from. And because it's only in one or two scrolls, they remove it. And so some translations will keep it and some translations will move it. And so in that case, there's, in the NIV, there's 49 verses that you can memorize that are simply... so there's a good tip for you. It'll also trip up some of those KJV people that are like, hey, our Bible is got everything in it. And then you can go, well, I know some verses that are blank. There you go. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of humor today. I mean, it's going to be quite the week. It's been quite the week last week with everything going on. So hopefully there's a little bit of humor will get you going.